Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're putting on our senior analyst hats to objectively examine a scenario that, quite frankly, keeps global strategists and corporate stakeholders wide awake at night. We're talking about the critical vulnerability of the Strait of Hormuz, and we'll be tracing the cascading global economic impacts of a potential energy blockade in this region. Look, this isn't just about distant geography or high-level geopolitics. It's fundamentally about the lifeblood of the global economy. It's about the stability of financial portfolios heavily tied to energy assets, and it's a harsh look at exactly how fast the logistical systems we rely on every single day could just completely freeze up. We're going to dig into the math, the operational realities, and the very tangible risks to global commerce.
One missile strike, one blocked waterway, and within days, the global economy starts choking. For a board-level audience navigating an era of pretty extreme supply chain volatility, well, this is the ultimate threat matrix. We aren't talking about some slow, multi-year economic decline where you can just gradually course correct. No, we're analyzing a sudden, localized event that has the raw power to instantly paralyze global commerce. It literally just takes one major disruption in exactly the right place to send a shockwave across the planet. For corporate leaders tuning in, the actionable insight here is absolutely crucial: rigorous scenario planning. If your supply chain or your financial modeling relies on the uninterrupted flow of global energy, assuming that this specific waterway will just always remain stable is a massive existential risk to your operations.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, the choke point. Get this, a staggering 20% of the planet's entire oil supply passes through this single, narrow strip of water in the Persian Gulf. When you're evaluating global energy security, having 1/5 of your vital resources squeezed through a single geographic choke point is an immense structural vulnerability. And just to put the physical reality of this into perspective, the operational shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz are astonishingly narrow. We're talking just 2 miles wide in either direction. That is an incredibly tight needle to thread for the world's massive supertankers. Now, while the rest of the world's combined supply makes up the remaining 80%, if you remove that 20% slice overnight, it leaves a gaping void. The rest of the market simply cannot fill it fast enough. Pipeline infrastructure has strict limits, strategic reserves are definitely finite, and global refineries are calibrated for very specific grades of crude. You can't just flip a magic switch and replace 20% of the world's energy output from somewhere else.
To truly grasp the scale of this vulnerability, you really just need one number: 21 million barrels. That is the monumental volume of oil moving through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. 21 million barrels. And perhaps the most sobering objective fact from our source material is that Iran has the capability to threaten all of it, potentially shutting down this entire daily flow in just 24 hours. For stakeholders holding energy-related assets, the immediate financial risk here is, frankly, catastrophic. I mean, what happens to global futures contracts when 21 million barrels physically vanish from the delivery schedule? You get an immediate, violent mathematical shock to energy portfolios worldwide. Volatility would spike to totally unprecedented levels as traders frantically try to price in an unquantifiable deficit. This isn't just a headache for shipping companies. It is a fundamental breakdown of the liquid energy markets that keep global industrial production running.
Moving right along to Section 2, immediate security risks.
So what does a disruption actually look like? First up, you have Iranian missile launches. Because military installations are so close to this commercial shipping lane, commercial vessels are basically always in range of both land and sea-based missile systems. Second, there's the severe risk of burning oil tankers in the waterway itself. A physical strike wouldn't just stop one ship. The wreckage, the environmental disaster, the massive fires, they'd create physical barriers that effectively close the entire corridor to any traffic behind it. And we've actually seen previous of this before. During the tanker war in the 1980s, hundreds of commercial ships were attacked right here, severely disrupting markets. Or on a macro logistical scale, remember when the Ever Given blocked the Suez Canal back in 2021? Now imagine that exact paralysis, but compounded by an active combat zone. Third, U.S. aircraft carrier deployments. Any major threat triggers the immediate deployment of massive naval assets, which instantly turns a commercial shipping lane into a highly volatile military theater. And this whole dynamic is deeply complicated by regional alliances. You've got established defense partnerships between the U.S. and Gulf states bumping right up against a complex network of Iranian-aligned proxy forces across the Middle East. A localized skirmish could easily draw in multiple allied networks, turning a simple transit dispute into a massive, multidimensional security crisis.
Let's pivot now to Section 3, the market reaction.
This is where the dominoes really start falling. Step 1. The supply is choked. The exact moment that waterway is blocked, the physical delivery of those 21 million daily barrels halts. Sure, markets trade on futures, but they absolutely panic at physical, undeniable shortages.
which leads straight into step 2, long fuel queues. This is the immediate, visible consumer reality. The shipping delays directly trigger a run on available fuel reserves, causing public panic and rationing at gas stations all over the world. And that consumer panic feeds right into step 3, a stock market crash. When energy supplies freeze up, manufacturing grinds to a halt, transportation costs absolutely skyrocket, and corporate stakeholders are looking at immediate devastating hits to their bottom line. For corporate leaders and supply chain managers, the biggest takeaway here is that if you're waiting for step 1 to actually happen, you've already failed at planning. Organizations have to actively stress test their operations against sudden energy inflation, build redundancies into their freight contracts, and aggressively hedge their logistics way before the market crashes, because by then, that initial localized military action will have already mutated into a full-blown global financial crisis.
Zooming out to the macro level, let's look at Section 4, Global Economic Fallout. Halting that massive supply volume inevitably triggers severe price inflation across 3 fundamental pillars of modern life. First, obviously, fuel prices. That's the most direct correlation. But that cascades immediately into food prices. Think about it. Modern agriculture heavily relies on petroleum products for fertilizers, not to mention the diesel fuel needed for tractors and global shipping fleets. When raw energy costs spike, the cost to grow, harvest, and transport a loaf of bread or a shipment of grain spikes right along with it. And finally, electricity bills. Power grids around the world are still heavily tethered to liquid energy and natural gas markets. This becomes a direct, highly quantifiable hit to business operational costs and everyday household budgets. But beyond the immediate inflation, a prolonged shortage in this region would almost certainly trigger massive, long-term geopolitical shifts. For example, a sustained blockade would essentially force Europe to drastically speed up its transition to renewable energy out of pure economic survival. Meanwhile, industrial powers in Asia would be pushed to forge new and potentially aggressive trade alliances just to secure alternate overland energy routes. The economic fallout really has the potential to rewrite the entire global map.
So, this brings us back to a definitive board-level summary. We are looking at a global energy network where 20% of the world's oil is squeezed through a 2-mile-wide corridor, tangled in deeply complex regional alliances, and highly vulnerable to a 24-hour total blockade. A disruption here practically guarantees physical supply shortages, rampant global food inflation, and immediate financial devastation for anyone holding energy assets. When the global economy literally starts choking, history has shown us time and again that nations will mobilize vast resources to secure their lifelines. So is this the trigger for the next global war? It's a stark, objective reminder of just how incredibly fragile global energy security really is. What do you think would ultimately be the tipping point? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a rigorous, structured look at the immense operational and economic stakes at play here.